An unwanted feature, it will always be unwanted. Now, how depressing is that? Well, actually, it's quite liberating in a way as well, that why waste our efforts on something that isn't wanted? Let's discover what the customer, what the user wants, and let's go and build that thing and make sure it's the right thing for our customers. The converse of that, right, is we don't want to live in a vacuum, in a bubble where we're constantly discovering stuff, getting all this gold, and it's untapped until we deliver it into production and we start realizing that value. So dual track development, dual track agile, dual track product management, you might hear a few different terms, is all about mashing up discovery and delivery to make sure we're getting those good decisions and getting things out rapidly. And it's all about making sure that we're breaking key activities down into two areas. The first of those, I have to keep taking that out, I'll hold on to that. The first of those is discovery work. And this is all about a focus on fast learning and validation. We should be invalidating a whole host of assumptions, finding out what the customer actually wants, finding out about what's going to deliver value. Typically, this is led by a product owner or a product manager. It's going to be led by UX specialists. But we want the whole team involved in this, so they get that sort of contextual overview of what's needed. The second focus is delivery work. And delivery work happens after all that discovery work, all that magic that happens outside of a sprint. And there's a focus here in terms of predictability and quality. This is where we want to get that working tested software. We want to make sure that we're scaling something. It's, it adheres to good security. We can put it out there in production. Typically, this is led by developers. It's led by technical people. But again, the whole team is involved with this. And dual track delivery is about mashing these two up together. It was a term that was first coined back in 2007 by a lady called Desiree C, I think. And it's been cottoned on to by Marty Kagan and Jeff Patton, who have written a lot of material about this. And roughly speaking, it's two activities that are happening parallel. So we've got our goals for the team, what's our mission, what are we going to do, and then we go into this discovery track. And then we have these handoffs, these feed-offs into delivery. And these things are happening continuously, right? The trouble is, when you look at this picture, it's not the intent of this picture, but it looks like we've got two distinct tracks. It looks like we've got a discovery track where the triad is going off and they're finding all this gold and they're getting that and they're reporting back to the team and they're handing it over to the team and the team are going off and delivering this stuff. And it kind of reminds me of a game, and I'm going to show my age a little bit here, a game that I bought in Orpington in 1983, and it's this, Mario Brothers. Anybody recognise this? Mario Brothers, yeah, Game & Watch, where you had Mario, and he was on the left-hand side, and he'd be picking up all these boxes of bottles, and he'd be shoving it over to the right-hand side to developer Luigi, who's grabbing this stuff, who doesn't really have the context of what's going on, and they've got this kind of divide between them. That is not the intention of dual track discovery, of dual track delivery. The intention of dual track delivery is to bring discovery and bring delivery together, to mesh them together. It's all about creating one product team. One product team that's responsible for ongoing discovery and delivery activities, measuring itself against outcomes rather than features shipped. It's all about creating one team who are looking to deliver that product together to get that sort of context and that overview. An interrelated team working in a complex environment. Check out this blog by Jeff Patton. It's really good. I kind of mentioned there's some material out there with dual track development. There's not an awful lot, right? And this is probably one of the seminal blogs around it from Jeff Patton. He draws it up like this, where we've got, again, a discovery track, again, we've got a development track, and we've got these empirical loops of discovery, of feedback coming out to the customer that, again, feeding into a development track. We've got these sprints or these time boxes, these iterations. We're incrementally building this stuff. Quality software that we're shipping to our customers. He makes a really salient point in this blog, and that is that people love pictures. I love pictures. Hands up, we love pictures? Yeah, we love pictures, right? And we're great at looking at pictures. as humans, we are not so good at reading, okay, and reading all the context around those pictures. And it still looks like this, and it's not the intention, but it still looks like we've got two separate tracks, that we've got a triad or a product manager and a few people going off, discovering all this stuff, even if it is empirically and iteratively, and then feeding off to a separate team. It doesn't give that distinction that it's one product team that we're looking for. Now, my rule of thumb, right, is if I cannot explain it, if the model doesn't fit in my head, I don't use it. And I know I've kind of got a biggish head, but if it doesn't fit in my head, I can't explain it, I won't use it. So I started to think around in terms of ultimately what we're looking to do, the thing that we're looking to do from a product team perspective, from a dual track development perspective, is to merge these two bubbles together. They're not hermetically sealed from one another. We don't do development work in isolation. We don't do discovery work in isolation. What we're trying to do is we're trying to connect the head with the body. We're trying to connect these two together. So again, as I mentioned, it's one interconnected team with a conceptual view of what the problem is, what the opportunity is, what we're trying to look to achieve in a complex environment. Hold that thought for a moment, right? Because we've got a couple of things here which are common, and that's empiricism. Empiricism-based is observation or knowledge based on observation and feedback. So they're key to both discovery and delivery work. The added complication that we have is there is more than one discovery. There's no single product discovery process, just as there is no single product development delivery process. Again, this is Marty Kagan saying this, and he's right, okay? There are so many different frameworks, even in Agile, you've got Kanban, Scrum, mashups of this, we've got design thinking, we've got human-centered design. There are so many different tools, so many different techniques. Sometimes we might choose to do a design sprint, other times we might go off and choose to do some human-centered design. It adds complexity, it adds complication to this dual-track discovery. I like this from Johnny Schneider, and he talks about product management as being a mashup of three mindsets. So we've got design thinking, where we're looking to explore that problem, we're looking to get some of that gold. We've got lean, much as Mike Orzum was going on about this morning, some really key stuff there, and some good stuff that we often forget, where we're looking to make sure we build the right things. And finally, agile, where we're building the thing right. Now, I kind of use these interchangeably often, right? And agilists, we are magpies, and we'll steal things from design thinking, and we'll steal things from lean, and we'll take customer journeys, and we'll rename them story maps. And that's great, right? That's great that we've got this toolbox of things, but we mustn't forget that there are experts who are leading this stuff. We shouldn't be pushing agile down the throats of, say, a designer or a UX specialist who has got much more credibility in that arena than myself, for instance, a lot more credibility. They're experts in design thinking. They're experts in human-centered design. We should be letting them get on and do their own thing. But fundamentally, that thing is looking to achieve the same stuff, okay? We can call it lean, we can call it lean UX, we can call it DevOps, but ultimately for me, in a digital product development environment, we are looking to achieve the same thing, the same outcome, an outcome for a customer. So we're going to start with a problem or opportunity. We're going to formulate some assumptions about that, what needs to be true for our product to be a success. We're going to build something, and we're going to run some experiments to build that thing. We're going to measure. We're going to gather some data and some feedback. We're going to learn. We're going to invalidate or validate those assumptions that we've made at the start, and then we're going to go around that loop again, that empirical loop. Called it here build, measure, learn, but very similar, or the same thing really, to the PDCA loop that Mike was talking about this morning. Now, what we found when we're going around this loop, when we're running these experiments, is actually we've discovered that there's roughly 4 buckets of work that we do. 4 buckets of work that 4 categories of work that we use to run our experiments. And these 4 fall broadly into 4 areas, really simple. Number 1, talk to a customer. Sounds relatively straightforward, right? Go and talk to a customer, find out what they want. Number 2, gather some data. Have we got some metrics, some measures on something where we can get this information from? Number 3, prototype something. Let's come up with, generate some ideas and get those tested out before we put it into production. And number 4, put it into production. That's where we're getting the value. Put something out there, put some working tested software in production so we can get some value. Now, I started out numbering these, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, sounds logical. We've got 4 of them. And then the chief product owner in business banking said, "And do we have to number them?" I said, "Well, no. Why?" And he said, "Because if we number them, it looks like we're doing it sequentially, right? And we're not." And so I said, "You're right." So I took the numbers out. Because, you know what? We're not doing these sequentially. We're picking the right experiment, the right tool, the right technique, and leaning on the experts at any given time, depending on the assumptions and depending on what we want to learn. We don't always have to gather some data. We might start with that, but it might not be number 2. We might start by prototyping something. We don't have to do these in order. The trick and the art is leaning on the experts to understand what experiment we should run and how and when. There are some key traits that we found with these. The first is, as I've mentioned, it's led by a specialist. Okay? It's led by a specialist who is in that arena, who knows that stuff. Number 2, the whole team is involved. If you want to do dual track discovery, dual track development, dual track delivery, the whole team is involved. The whole team has that contextual awareness of what we're looking to achieve. And number 3, it's time boxed. It's really good to time box stuff just to make sure that we're not over-egging something, whether that's something we're developing or whether it's an experiment we're running in terms of talking to a customer or prototyping something. Now, I'll come back in a moment because I was trying to work out, right, in terms of how is all that stuff fitting together? How does that fit in a single model? How can that stuff fit in my head? And I do what I usually do when I'm trying to get inspiration. I went out and took the kids out, and we just took our mind off it. And my little boy said, "Hey, let's go for something to eat." He's always saying that. So we went for something to eat, and we went to a Chinese restaurant, and we got some food, and there was one of those big old Lazy Susans there, and he was laughing because, you know, we were putting food on the Lazy Susan, and he was grabbing stuff in the middle. The stuff in the middle he was putting in there and getting it really quickly, and he was waiting for the stuff on the outside to loop around really quick. And it got me thinking, you know what? That's a bit like us running our experiments in an empirical feedback loop. We've got a bit of a commonality here. Is this going to work? Oh. We've got a bit of commonality here, if my GIF works, where, you know what, sometimes there are experiments that go around that build, measure, learn loop much more quickly than others. Things on the outside are going to take quite a bit longer. Those things are going to take longer for us to measure, to get feedback, to learn from them. The things in the middle, they're going to go around really quick, and we're going to find out that information really quickly. My little boy didn't have any SI Super Dry, by the way. I kept the beer away from him. So you know, it got me thinking in terms of the model that we've got here, rather than having 2 tracks, is actually just 1 track. It's just one empirical track of build, measure, learn. The thing that changes is the experiments we run. The thing that changes is the types of work we choose. And these types of work we choose speed round at different feedback loops. If you want to put something into production, that's quite an expensive mechanism to learn about our customer. So maybe we want to go out and talk to a customer first. We're going to get some rapid feedback on that potentially, and it's going to be lower cost. But we're still going to build, measure, learn, and feed that round. The trick is relying on experts to pick which tool, which technique to use, which bucket to use, and get that balance between speed of learning, speed of getting around that feedback loop as quickly as we possibly can, and value to the customer. Because, you know what, until we deliver something to production, we don't get that value. We don't realize that value from the customer. But again, as I mentioned, delivering working tested software to the customer is an expensive way to run a test. So let's run through those experiments really quick. So talk to a customer. To be straightforward, right? Customers at the heart of everything we do. We get UX researchers to lead this work. They are the experts in this field. And now I know the difference between UX and UI. I never use a /UI afterwards. I've learned that mistake. But we get UX researchers to lead this work. They'll go out, they'll talk to customers. Because you know what? Not all developers want to be leading and talking to a customer. But it's giving them the opportunity to go out. It's giving them the opportunity to go out, take notes, but they're not feeling under pressure that they have to write a set of questions, or they have to front up an interview with a customer. So some of the things, some of the tools, some of the techniques we use are things such as personas. And we're very lucky. We've got an in-house user research team. They come up with a set of behavioral personas that we use, so we get an understanding about who our customer is. And when we've got a good understanding of who our customer is, what they need, that's when the ideas can start to flow. So it's led by a UX researcher. The whole team are involved with this. Trouble is, once you start uncovering stuff about your customer and you walk in their shoes, it can be a bit stinky, right? You can uncover stuff that actually you wish you hadn't uncovered. It's a bit uncomfortable. The trick is to take that and do something with it. And hopefully you may have seen Chetan and Penny's talk this morning. And what they did is they went through a customer journey map with some UX researchers. And they wanted to find out a little bit about registration and how our customers register for online banking. They found out that it was a bit stinky. Okay? Now, they are not their customers. They are not business bankers. But what they did is they set themselves up as a chocolate company and a cider company. They went out, one team registered in store and one team registered online, and they came up with this, a customer journey map, which then led to lots of ideas on how they can improve. How can they look to improve that process for the customer? The second thing is gather some data. Again, this is led by an expert. Generally, it can be data insights, data analytics person. We might even get a developer to trawl under the hood to try and find out what's under there, what's going on with that data. It might not be some data that we've got already. Maybe we have to do a release to production to gather some data and then wait. Other things we can do here is to get a product owner to do some competitor analysis, maybe look at a tool like Tableau so we can gather some information around it. Again, get it led by an expert, but each different type of data that you need is going to be led by a different type of expert in that instance. Number 3 is prototype something. Generally, we prototype something by getting a UX designer involved, and they'll facilitate those sessions. They're the experts. We're not trying to tell them how to do those jobs. But roughly, we kind of break it down into 2 areas where they're facilitating, they're leading wireframe sessions. And here's a team doing a Crazy 8 session, or get on the back end of a Crazy 8 session, where they've generated lots of ideas in terms of what a potential solution could look like. And then the designer here is facilitating that, leading that, using their expertise to synthesize something down to something that might work good, using good practice. Then they could run an experiment and take that out to a customer. Again, we're relying on the expert. The second sort of prototype is Spike It, right? And Spike It is where you do a technical proof of concept to reduce doubt. Is this thing even feasible? Could we do this in this technology? And typically we get this led by a technical person, a developer, maybe a tester as well, maybe an architect, someone like that. And we time box it and we feed that back to the team. Again, it's picking the appropriate people to lead that piece of work. And the final one is put it in production, right? And put it in production, as I mentioned, it's the most expensive way that we can learn about our customer, but it's the only way typically that we're going to start to generate some value or get some value. And this is going to be a long feedback loop. It is a learning activity, right? And we have to remember that. Start small, do the minimum viable product, do the minimum thing you can possibly get it out there, and then start measuring the results, seeing what's happening. Pause, learn, and then scale the thing up. I was talking to that same product owner, and he said, yeah, but we don't always put stuff into production. Do we have to put it into production? He said, sometimes a change that we put in place isn't always a software change. Sometimes it's a process change or business change or something that we identify. Couldn't we call it make a change, right? And this is great, you know, this is great. Everything we do doesn't have to be a software solution, and we found that. And it's about making teams not feel like frauds when they don't come up with a software solution. So how does all that fit together? Well, we got our teams to come up with a goal or a target metric. Where do they want to be? We start measuring that, and then we find out what our current condition is. Where are we now, right? So say if a team wanted to reduce the number of calls to a help desk, great. Which help desk? How many calls are they getting to that help desk at the moment? Find out what your current condition is. We come up with our assumptions, our obstacles, our ideas, and then we build. And we build by running one of those experiments in one of those 4 categories there, led by one of the experts, with the whole team involved, tracking it on one board for that visibility perspective. And then we measure, we learn from that, and we keep feeding around that loop. So we're learning about our customer, we're learning what they value, we're building the right features, and we're not just delivering unwanted features to production. We're not just building something efficiently and effectively that someone didn't want in the first place. So I mentioned we put that on a board, right? But the key thing here is this stuff is good. We've got all these experiments. We've got all these things that we're looking to do. But how do we make that habitual? How do we make sure that we take all that good stuff, all those experiments, the stuff that we're talking here from a product development, dual track development perspective, and make sure that we do it on a day-to-day basis? As this chap here says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. That's Aristotle, I think. But always trust a man in a toga. That's a good mantra. And he's right. How do we make that habitual with teams? How do we make sure that it becomes part of their daily routine? If it's not habitual, they're not going to change. They're not going to see the value in that stuff. So we started to look at how can we link all this stuff together. We've got quite a key set of language here. We've got some stuff that seems to be working. You know, it's good stuff for the product teams. How can we make it habitual? So we fell upon, again, Melissa Perry, and we looked at her product carter and the stuff she's doing with product carters. And the whole thing about a product carter is you set yourself a challenge. What's your mission? What's your purpose? What's your challenge? What do you want to achieve, right? And again, this is from Lean. And then the next thing we do is we work out, okay, how far are we from that challenge? What's our current condition? Where are we now? And where do we need to get to? The next thing we do is we come up with what is our first logical step that we'd like to get to in terms of the target condition. What do we think is achievable in a certain time frame? And then we go through and we take steps and we run experiments to look to try and achieve and get to that target condition, product carter. So I started to introduce the product carter, and we were all kind of happy, and hey, that's great. And then someone said, what's a carter? So again, I go back to the thing, as I said before, if it doesn't fit in my head, language is really key. We want to make sure we're using a common set of language here. And so I explained, well, a carter, it's a set of steps that you do, and I got a bit lost, really. So you know what? This was raised by another wise man with a beard. Actually, not Aristotle, but Donald no, not you, sorry, Clark. You are wise, but you're not in this instance. It was Donald in BNZ. But, you know, what's a carter? So you know what? We have found that language is really important. Language is really important, that we use a common set of language, a common set of vocabulary that everyone understands. Don't just randomly chuck words in there that sound cool, that don't really resonate with the people there. So we changed the name. What we did is we went back and we looked at what are we looking to achieve? What are the steps that we go through as a team when we're doing our product development, our product management approach, our dual track discovery approach? And we looked at some of the words and we thought, you know what? We start teams with a clear goal. They focus on a clear goal, not a process. So they understand their mission, they understand where they want to be, where they want to get to, and that gives them a context and it gives them an identity as a team. What do they want to achieve? it then allows us to start taking some clear steps. It's not like throwing a random dart in a dartboard and, I hope I'm getting closer to that goal. It's about understanding and running things so you know that you're taking logical steps and throwing darts to get closer towards that bullseye. And we do that by the next step of coming up with some clear metrics. Metrics grounded in research, okay? Metrics with a number against them, otherwise it's not a metric. Metric with a number against it that gives us a clear indication of where we want to be, what's achievable, and what is our current condition. And this allows the team to start to take some logical steps towards achieving that thing. Are we improving? Are we looking are we actually making logical steps towards achieving that goal, that purpose? So that leads on to the next thing, assumptions. It's always my favourite word, assumptions. We don't have requirements. We don't kick off by sizing up requirements. We kick off by weighing up assumptions, right? And assumptions are things that need to be true for our product to succeed. So we get together with our team and we try and drive out all these assumptions, all these kind of opinions, and we come up with this thing from Lean UX, from Jeff Gottheld's Lean UX, a assumptions matrix, and we categorize them. What are the assumptions that are high risk? The things that, you know what, if we get wrong, we've got a high risk here, maybe reputational risk, maybe risk of building something that we didn't need to build, maybe that we're going off in completely the wrong direction or we're really annoying the customer. Through to the unknown. We just don't know about this stuff, right? This is really unknown and we're just going to have to find out about it. And we map those in the top right-hand side and we focus on running experiments against those first, invalidating or invalidating those first. And it always reminds me of one of my favourite quotes from this guy, Christopher Hitchens, and he says, what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. And often what we find in teams is opinion can be stated as fact. And I'll be the same as well, right? Where my bias will come to the fore. Assumptions is a great anti-bias tool to make sure that we're actually validating this thing, treating everything as an assumption, and I'm not just saying we need it because I say so, right? So this gives us permission to run experiments. What is the minimum experiment we can run? What is the smallest experiment we can run to quickly validate and test our assumptions, invalidate or validate them? And we want to look for the smallest, sweetest spot that we can find. And that generally is, what's that narrowest customer segment that's going to make sense for us? And what's that minimum viable part of the product slice that we could test against? And then the trick is to run the experiments in one of those four categories and get the experts involved to run them, go around that build, measure, learn loop, and then invalidate or validate it. And that's one thing that makes me a little bit cross in Agile. Lots of things make me cross, but this is one of them. Where we talk about failure, right? We talk about, hey, we failed. That's great, we failed. Don't fail. Instead, succeed in invalidating your assumptions. And that's a success, right? If we've invalidated an assumption, it's not a failure, it's a success. We should be proud of that. And one of the things that people really want to hear about at Digital B&Z in the business team is, what have you learned about? What have you invalidated? What have you validated? What is the opportunity cost that we haven't gone down, we haven't built because we've invalidated that we need to do that thing? And they want teams to celebrate that stuff. They want teams to show what they've learned and be proud of that stuff. Because that's showing that we're not building an unwanted feature that no one's going to use. We're not just pouring money down the drain. We're building stuff that the customer needs, and we're spending our money in the right area. So how do we pull that stuff together? Well, we started to look at taking that product Carter and running product experiment maps. I suppose we could, for want of a better purpose, we could call it a Carter, but we run through slightly different steps, right? And it looks like this. Nice and visual, print it out as a poster, stick it on a wall, you can get Post-its on that, right? You can keep it visual, it can be led by an expert, but the whole team can see it. The whole team can see the experiments that you're running, along with other stakeholders as well. And what do? We start with a goal. What's the goal that we're looking to achieve as part of these experiments? What's our target metric? What's the next step that we want to get to? And then our experiments run left to right. So what's our current condition? Where are we now with this thing? If it's calls to help desk, how many calls to help desk? 100 calls to help desk? Right, that's our current condition. Our next experiment might be, how do we find out what the highest type of call to that help desk is? And then we run one of our experiments, which will fit into one of those 4 categories. Sorry, before that, we'll grab some assumptions. What assumptions do we have around that thing? And then we'll run some experiments fitting into one of those 4 areas. We'll run that experiment, get a specialist to run it, and at the end, put up there what you've learned. And then bang, that will feed into another experiment. This has led to our own product Carter, which is how we look to make it habitual, which is our product experiment map, so we can make it intentional. So look, this was one of my little girl's favourite books, You Choose, right? And I think we shouldn't forget that. So any model needs to be agnostic of a framework, it needs to be high enough level, it needs to be simple, but it needs to be empowering and allow the experts, the specialists, to choose the right tools and techniques given the situation, the sort of experiment that we want to run. There are so many different types of tools and techniques, too many for us to know in a lifetime, that let's rely on the experts to choose the right runs given the sort of experiment that we need to run. But they all follow a build, measure, learn feedback. They're all driven by a specialist. They all cycle around that empirical framework. And they're all looking to try and learn more or validate or invalidate things about our customers. But the key thing and the art of that is get your whole team involved and let your specialists lead the type of work. That's me. 1 minute left. Now, I left this one up. I nearly went away then, didn't I? Agile Alliance New Zealand. Now, this is a shameless plug. Agile Alliance New Zealand, we set that up last year. I'm treasurer. I don't know why they made me treasurer. I know I work for a bank, but I'm not very good with numbers. I'm treasurer. Shane Hasty is chairman, and Sandy Moley is secretary. We've got a whole bunch of people who are getting involved. But what we're looking to do from this is try and get Agile promoted in areas outside of Auckland and Wellington. We're looking to help non-for-profit organisations and community events. If you're keen, if you've got an initiative that you think would be really good to be funded by Agile Alliance New Zealand, get in contact with us, give us a call, or if you think we can help, just drop us a line. Or if you're keen to get involved. That was a shameless plug, but it's kind of altruistic. So, yeah. And that's me.